congratulations, first of all. The record's great. I've been listening to it for about a month now. So
Oh, wow.
how satisfying that the Halloween project has finally come together. You must be thrilled.
Yeah, it's taken me over 4 decades to convince everybody that we need to move over to the dark side, but they finally agreed.
Yeah, speaking of that dark side, it's a side of Duran, I like a lot. I mean, I'll always take Before the Rain over My Own Way, for example. But I think it's that light and shade that's so important in a band's output, isn't it? It's so important to embrace those different sides of your identity and your personality as a band.
I think that's what makes us the band we are, for sure. We set our parameters very wide on the first album. If you think, we had songs like Girls on Film and Planet Earth cohabiting with Waiting for the Night Boat and Tel Aviv, and To the Shore. So we've always had that sort of light and shade balance in there. I think some people are really only aware of the singles, which tend to be mostly on the lighter side. But if you listen to the albums, as you know, yeah, we always have that element in our sound.
Definitely. And, there were a lot of songs that presumably from the back catalogue anyway could have gone straight onto a Halloween-esque album, shall we say, with that kind of grandeur and gothic feel to them. I think as well, though, Nick, I interview a lot of bands, and it could be someone who's putting their first single out, or it could be somebody that's 10 albums in. But, the overwhelming thing that I get from Duran Duran is that sort of incessant desire to constantly create and to actually go forward.
Yeah. For me, that's what I like most, I guess. I always say to people that the exciting thing for me is when I go into a studio and there's nothing. I don't go in with anything prepared, and at this point nobody does, and we don't usually have any lyrics. We certainly haven't got any musical scores or chords in our head even. It just flows out. But I love that when I leave that evening, that night, early that morning, whenever it might be, that something exists that didn't exist earlier that day. And if you're lucky, something good exists that you find out the next day when you go in again. But the creative process is fascinating and exhilarating for me. I like the other aspects of what we do. Playing the live shows has been fantastic this year and last year. We've had some of the best shows we've ever played, but they don't sort of mean anything to me unless we've written something new. They have to be sort of legitimized, if you like. And it's not that we play entire new albums like some bands do. We just fit in a few songs here and there that we think will keep the audience excited and not make them feel that we're punishing them.
Yeah. And speaking of something new and something good being created, we could actually probably devote this chat to Confessions in the Afterlife, because I think, seriously, that is one of the best songs Duran Duran have ever recorded.
Wow. Well, Simon will be thrilled to hear that. He worked really hard on the lyrics on these 3 new songs, because, it takes him a long time. And we didn't have long. Of course, the lyrics existed to the older Duran songs and all the cover songs, so the pressure was off. But on those 3 tracks, we delivered them within literally about a 2-week period, and I think the concepts of them are really good, particularly that one. The idea that in some sort of afterlife you are completely forgiven for everything, I think is perhaps something that lots of people would like to exist.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's got that kind of delicate sort of beauty that something like, I mean, it's easy to compare things and find reference points, but sort of Palomino and, something even like Missing from the Arcadia records in there.
That's what I based my sound palette on literally on that song. So it's very perceptive of you, John. I thought about that because Missing is a ghost story. And I always remember that song from when we did it. I was in the control room with Simon and all the other musicians, our percussionist, a jazz bass player we were working with, Mark Egan, Laurie Anderson's percussionist, who was quite extraordinary, David Van Teegem, Masami, Japanese guitarist. They'd all come from such diverse musical backgrounds. And we showed them the chords and the arrangement for the song in a very simple way with just one keyboard or an acoustic guitar, and said, right, just go in there and we're just going to count this in and let's see what happens. And we pushed up the faders on the desk to hear what they were playing as I was playing in the control room and Simon was singing. And I was mystified. I'd never heard anything like that sound before. And that moment to me is really one of the most important in our entire career, because I realized that people coming from different places and mixing that together, that's when you get something really different and extraordinary. It was a true epiphany. And so that was what I used to base the sound palette.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a new fan favorite. I really, really do. I mean, the feedback I'm sure you're going to get from that will be really positive. I mean, to have it sort of at the tail end of what we might call an interim project is very generous.
Well, that's good. I'm thrilled that you like that one. Interestingly, when we were doing it, it came out of the show we played in Vegas, and we'd rehearsed under some duress, some of the band. We rehearsed about 14 new songs, meaning 7 of ours that we hadn't played for many, many years, some since the 80s, and about 7 cover versions. And it was a lot of work, particularly for Simon. In fairness, he had to learn most of the lyrics, and we only had a few days here and there to actually do it. But when we played the show, it went really well, and everyone was relieved, but sort of uplifted by it as well. And that's when we said, well, why don't we make it an album? Come on, we've got all these songs. All we need to do is go in the studio and record them the way they are. And of course, I opened up another can of snakes by going into the studio and starting to layer things up a bit and saying, well, why don't we change the arrangement on this? And then John said, well, let me start that one. I've got an idea for that. And then I'd suggested Bury a Friend as an extra cover version because I loved the song and I thought we should have something much more contemporary on there. And so we did that. Simon loved that one. I think really did something special with it. So it just sort of grew organically out of these strange different pathways, and they all converged somehow. Yeah. And not even I in my wildest dreams would have imagined that it was going to fit together so seamlessly. Because I thought it's so disparate. How on earth are we going to make a version of the Talking Heads song work with a Billie Eilish song and something that we wrote when we were kids in 1982? How is that going to work on this album with something that we just did 2 days ago? But I guess the answer was quite simple in the end. It was that we all played them and made them sound like Duran Duran were playing them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it became a Duran Duran album. And I never think about things like that because John and I are always plotting about what are we going to do with the sonic architecture of this record? How are we going to make this one different to that record? And should we do this with the electronics? And what's the kit going to sound like? And are we going to use orchestration? And in fact, we've sort of reached a point where whatever we play, any of us, and obviously identified by Simon's voice, it sounds like Duran Duran.
I was going to say my favorite cover on it is the Billie Eilish song. I think
really,
Bury a Friend's really, really good. Yeah, I think that's definitely my favorite. And I think my favorite of the reinterpretations, Nick, would definitely be Secret October 31st. I mean, that has taken on an entire new personality for me, that one.
Yeah. Well, it's always been a fan favorite. It was something that Simon and I did late one night with Alex Sadkin when we were making the 3rd album. And Union of the Snake had been sent off to the record label. These were in times way before we had faster means of communication. So you had to make a master tape, make a copy of it, put the tape in a FedEx, send it off. We were in Australia, so I think you had to go to New York to Bob Ludwig to go and get the thing mastered. And it was a big process. And it got there and they called us and said, well, where's the B-side? Because, of course, for a single, you needed a B-side. We didn't have one. We had nothing finished. So I said, Simon, well, we're just going to have to stay up late, aren't we, and make something. And we wrote Secret October in that night, finished it, mixed it, and sent it off in the morning.
Right.
And so it never made the album. It was just a B-side, but the fans have always liked it. And since it was called Secret October, it was really a gift for this album. Yeah. And I'd had this old musical box sitting around that you can program. You could take all the little parts, almost like taking a watch apart, and you can make it play different tunes. I was fiddling around with it for hours. And in the end, I said to Josh, our engineer, you know, why don't we just sample these? It'll be so much I can play them on a keyboard. And so we sampled all the notes and made a musical box part for the theme from Secret October. And that was really that was really the impetus for the rest of the song.
No, it's really interesting as well. You know, the obviously the title track and the whole Danse Macabre subject, and you know yourself. I mean, right back to the late Middle Ages, this has been a fascination for artists and poets alike, and you know, for people to view this kind of the night the spirits rise and do their dance. It's as if you're kind of carrying the baton on a little bit in this one.
You know, it has been there forever. It's folklore. It's old world magic. It's whatever you want to call it, but there's something about it. The fact that none of us quite know where we're going after we leave here. Yeah. The fact that many of us don't believe in religion, and whereas others really believe very strongly in it. Science, what we're learning, you know, space travel, all those things are interlinked to me. The unknown is what we're talking about, and that's to me much more fascinating than the known.
And from a sonic point of view as well, Nick, who knew a foghorn was such a cool instrument? It really works at the start, doesn't it?
I have to say, I'm going to give credit for that one to Mr. Simon Le Bon.
Right.
He's the one that wanted to use that, a very specific sound. And yeah, it is a truly great sound. It's just sort of the ultimate dance floor alert, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. No, we had so much fun doing it. And the new songs, we only literally had 2 days with Nile Rodgers and 2 days with Mr. Hudson. That was it. And so we got 2 tracks with each person in those 2 days. The second track we got with Nile was a much more uplifting, funky, groovy track, which we haven't finished yet. That'll end up, I don't know, maybe we'll get it out for next summer. We'll see. Cool. But to get 3 new songs was a real achievement. We were hoping we might get 2.
Brilliant. Nick, it's been a pleasure talking to you, but I can't let you go without a couple of deep cuts. As you know, we've done this with the rest of the band. So I'm going to kick off with one from Medazzaland, Be My Icon, an absolute favorite of mine.
Be My Icon was an idea that I'd had for a lyric about a crazy fan. It wasn't so much one of our crazy fans, because, yeah, we know some of you are crazy out there. Look, we're crazy fans ourselves for lots of other bands, but actually, mostly our fans are kind of amazing and not really crazy. This was more based on actually the Scorsese movie with Robert De Niro, The King of Comedy. For those of you who've seen it, you see there's a rather crazy fan in it. And I quite like the idea of just a regular person being put into the position where they become incredibly famous and have to deal with the things that come with fame. So it was a fun one to write, with different voices coming from different places. Warren came up with an absolute killer guitar riff for Be My Icon. And I think Simon's delivery is suitably demented. So yeah, works for me.
And finally, and this is a song that doesn't get enough mentioned when it comes to Duran Duran, and it's an Arcadia song though, so that's probably why. Lady Ice.
Lady Ice is actually one of my personal favorite achievements in the songwriting category. From our entire career. When we were making the Arcadia album in Paris at Studio de la Grande Armée, we were there hold up for almost 18 months on and off. It was really a long time to be making a record. But somehow we were striving for absolute perfection, which to this day I still don't believe really exists. But one day I'll find it, maybe. And we did many versions of many songs, and a couple of them started to shine like diamonds early on. One of them was Lady Ice. I don't know what it is about the song. The intro itself, I worked on for quite a short while with a Fairlight, which was a computerized musical synthesizer at that time, an extraordinary instrument. And I was still learning what to do with it. And it just doesn't sound like anything else. That's what I love about it. And yeah, it's a song we've talked about playing live lots of times as Duran Duran. It is an Arcadia song. John loves it too, but we've never got around to it yet. So maybe one day.
Nick, an absolute pleasure as always. Best of luck with it all. Great to chat.
Thank you, John. Good to see you. And
See
good
you.
luck with your show and everything. And I look forward to next time when we meet.
Cheers.
Thanks, John. Good to see you.